Welcome to the show. Our intention for you today is that you'll hear this, and if you've been feeling behind in your day, week, month, or even life, this will give you some peace of mind and let you know that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Welcome to the 5-Year You podcast, a show dedicated to helping you become the best version of yourself, one day at a time. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Kat, and we promise to keep it raw, real, and relatable.
Are you ready to grow? Welcome to the show. How you doing, Kat?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So we were just talking about this episode, and you just wrote an email about it, but I really do like it. It's when you're feeling behind. And I think as achievers, I like to label myself that, whether I am or not is up for debate. But
you are.
Thanks. I always feel like I'm behind. And it doesn't matter if I do a million things in a day or nothing. That feeling is ever present in my life. Do you feel like that? Or do you feel like you're on top of it?
Yeah, no, I wrote, you know the answer to that. I'm definitely not. I never feel like the work is done. I always feel behind. And that's why I wrote that email today, because what I said in the very beginning of the email is the feeling that I hate the most is the feeling of being behind. This comes in all categories. Like, I love being on time to places and bringing the kids to school. I love being on time. And when I feel like I'm not, I get very overwhelmed and stressed. And then when I'm overwhelmed and stressed, I'm cranky to everybody in my life. Okay. And I gave the example of, like, sometimes I'm behind on the housework. Sometimes I feel behind on the laundry. Sometimes I feel behind on my work, which happens often. And, you know, sometimes I feel behind on my self-care. Like, I'll look down and be like, oh my God, I need to shave my legs or something like that. You know, it's like, but sometimes it's all of them at once. And it can be so hard to know where to start, because once you feel overwhelmed, things start shutting down.
Right. So I can definitely relate to that. Not the shaving legs part, but other things.
Learn something new about you. That's fine.
I'm not big on shaving my own legs. But yeah, I find that when we are feeling like that, when we're feeling that overwhelm, it kind of becomes pervasive. But I honestly, I'm hearing you talk about it, and I'm reflecting as we're going through this, and I'm thinking, like, have I ever felt like caught up? You know, we talk about feeling behind, and it's like, but the opposite feeling is caught up. And I don't know if I've ever felt like, okay, we're good now. I can coast for a little bit. I don't think I've ever felt that. Have you? Do you?
No, but it could be. I know you and I, so interesting tidbit. Andrew and I are the same Myers-Briggs 4 letters. We're both INFJ. So interestingly, there's like less than 1% of the population that is that combination. We're both that. But we're also both achievers on the Enneagram. And I think just that achiever mentality is, if there's time, you can always do more. And then there's like never enough time. And so I think for us, the biggest challenge is having like a defining start and end to the workday, you know, learning how to shift focus and be present with our kids. And that can be challenging, because the reason that we feel behind is because of the expectations we place on ourselves. And we have said many times, like, we've done a whole episode on one of the biggest reasons that relationships have hard times is because of expectations we place on the other person. But we also place expectations on ourselves. Oh, I should be doing this, or I should be looking this way, or I should be this weight, or I should be further along. Because feeling behind isn't just a day-to-day thing. It's also a thing many people feel in life as they're comparing themselves to other people their same age, and, you know, maybe someone else, I don't know, sold their company or owns a huge house and you don't. And so you feel behind, like you should be further along.
Right. And I'll tell you this, because I tell you this all the time when we work, you really need to stop shitting on yourself. So it's just that it's seriously, it's the worst word in the human language. Well, I'm sure there's other ones that we can't say on this podcast, but um,
Yeah.
you know, but that's it. Like we go through life saying should, and who is that should based on? Is it based
Right.
on it's something you either inside of you or outside of you has come up, and you've believed that you need to be a certain way, have a certain thing, do a certain thing, and
Right.
it. I think what needs to come up is that check in of going, wait, do I actually want this? Do I actually want, do I actually want to build a company that I sell? Do I actually want to have the big house, fancy car, or is that actually going to stress me out? Is that
Yeah.
actually going to fill my is it actually going to fill my buckets, or is it going to leave me feeling even worse because now I have a house that I have to pay for and take care of and
Hmm.
all the things, or I have to have this car, and now everywhere I park with this car I'm going to be worried that somebody's going to scratch
Nervous.
it,
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot to be said about kind of looking at things and going, does that really resonate with me?
Mm.
That
That
said,
that is a good strategy for sure.
well, yeah, it just becomes that self reflection, right? And we talk about this a lot together. And when you're creating your 5 year you, it's all about authenticity. It's not about what the Joneses have, it's about what
Right.
you want. And those two things, I can guarantee you, are miles apart when you start actually getting to who you actually are, like we talked about in the Layers of Life episode. When you get to your soul, when you get to who you are, maybe you aren't the achiever you think you are. Maybe you're doing that because you're trying to please everyone around you so that you look good for everyone else, but really you just want to wear sweatpants and t-shirts all day. He said wearing sweatpants and t-shirts all day. So yeah, just something to ponder.
Yeah. Well, no, and I appreciate that. And I think that's a really good exercise. And I have said before on this podcast, but I'll share it again. The ultimate feeling that I want to have as my 5 year self is calm, calm and
Mm,
peace. And when I
okay.
feel behind on all the things, I am not getting closer to that feeling I want to have. And so I've really had to implement a lot of different strategies that might be helpful to other people. So, taking it on a broader sense, let's say I'm feeling behind in life. I can easily, and I have many times before, beat myself up. Like, there's a lot of this inside of me that's like, oh, I had those things. And then I got divorced and I kind of had to start over. And I can kind of go down that like victim path of like, I had the beautiful house and I had, this little Pinterest family with the boy girl twins. I had these things and then I didn't. Or
Okay.
I can use, all the skills that I know and I have, and instead of looking at what I don't have, I can sit here and start to go through this gratitude thing. It's like I feel behind because I'm not where I used to be, but do I have a safe home? Yes. Do I live in a safe neighborhood? Yes. Are my children in a good school? Yes. Are we all healthy? Yes. Do I have food on the table every night? Yes. Do I have work that I love? Yes. Not a lot of people can say that. Even people who make 100 times as much as me, 10 times as much as me can't say that. We
Mm-hmm.
love what we do.
Yes.
And so that is like a bigger scale. When I get to the day-to-day granular things of like, oh my God, I have 3 articles due today and we got to record a podcast and we got to send it. And I'm like, I have to know where to start for me. And maybe you can talk like there's
Right.
a couple of different strategies when you're dealing with this massive like pile of stuff that you just have to do in this 3D world. And because there are a couple of different ways you can handle it depending on what works for you. So why don't you give some ideas on those day-to-day overwhelms?
Yeah, when we were talking about this before the show, but for the one big one that always came up, and it's like one of the first personal achievement growth books that I ever read, was Eat That
Mm-hmm.
Frog by Brian Tracy. And it's like 21 ways to get more done. And he recommends every morning you eat the frog, which is the worst thing, the biggest thing that you have to do that day. You do it right out of the gate because you have the whole day in front of you, you have the energy, whole bunch of reasons for it. And that way you go through the rest of the day knowing that you've eaten that frog. The problem is that we've talked about is not everyone is like that. And there's somebody on this podcast that's really not like that. And it's not me.
Yeah.
And
I
that's good
just
though,
like
because you
that's
know
just
that.
not what works for me. Yeah, it's just I learned this from, and I use this all the time. I learned it from a graduate school professor. I remember in grad school we had to write several papers every week. You know, you read like a book a week, you write a paper, but in each class, right? So
Hmm.
I remember telling her like I'm just like overwhelmed. Like I don't even know how I'm going to get all these words done. And she was like, just throw some words on the page. Start with one sentence. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't have to be pretty. Just start writing. Because for me personally, because when I get overwhelmed, I step into procrastination. And I know this about myself. So for
Yes.
me personally, getting from 0 to 1 is a massive, massive for me. And so what works for me
For
is
sure.
to get started, to go from 0 to 1, I cannot start with the frog. I have to start with whatever, the cricket, you know, like, is that smaller than a frog? Like, I
Sure.
have to pick the tiniest thing because it's like the big boulder chasing Indiana Jones. Like, in order to get that first push, I've got to do something small to like start the ball rolling. Then I have energy and motion and it stays in motion.
Hmm.
I will
So,
never go from 0 to the biggest thing. I would,
right.
that would block me all day.
Right. Well, it's good that you know that about yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to make mention right now that Catherine made a movie reference, which probably will never happen again on this
Are
show.
you
So,
so proud of me?
I,
I knew that the boulder went with Indiana Jones and
you
everything.
knew it was a movie too, not a TV show, not Star
I
Wars. It was
did.
really, really impressive. Yeah, that's super cool.
Thank you.
Like,
I will carry that
kudos.
compliment with me all day. Guys, I am the
Yeah.
worst at movie conversation. Like, if you're like, oh, have you seen that movie? I promise you the answer is no. If you're like, oh, yeah, that actor was in this. I love this actor. I have no idea who you're talking about. Like,
And
and Andrew loves movies. He's the opposite. He knows
I'm the
like
exact
every
opposite.
movie. He's like, watch all, and I'm just like, he could sound like the funniest person in the world and just make movie references all day, and I have no idea what he's talking
I am
about.
only funny to Catherine because I am literally ripping off every movie that I've seen and making
And
it
I
my
have no
own.
idea, so it
Yes,
works.
it works. Um, when for myself too, like I find for my days, I don't often do the biggest task first thing. I find that I'll just kind of see where my I like to say follow my muse, but it's not always like the things that are great. It's sometimes it's like, there's grunt work that needs to happen. There's this, there's that. And I just know that when I get to eating the frog, I have to have momentum getting to that.
Yes.
So even
Yeah.
if it's like you said, like just doing like putting that first line on the page and then that gets you going, or if it's, I know that I don't have enough time to get into the big thing just yet, then I'll do that. But I don't think there's a right way. One of the things I've been really examining in my life right now is how there's not a right way for everyone. There is the right
Right.
way for you. And I used to kind of feel like a fair weather learner, I'll call it, where it's like, I would go try this diet and it doesn't work, but, I would go all in on it for maybe a week to a year, just trying to see how it goes and sometimes things stuck and sometimes things don't, but I would be really hard on myself because I'd label everything as a failure. Now
Yeah.
I'm kind of coming at things and going, I'm again trying to be the scientist of my own life and look at things and go, okay, well, does this make sense for me? And all I can do is figure out what's working for me and share it with you and our listeners and our readers so that
Mm-hmm.
they understand, okay, I'm doing this. I also tried these other things and it didn't work. So I have tried doing the biggest task in the morning. Some days that works. Most days it's like I'm just shaking my head and staying in bed. I'm like, yeah, that's not really for me.
Yeah.
But it's really important that you know yourself. I mean, that's where it all kind of comes back to. But
Yeah, I think that's what we're encouraging people to do all the time in this podcast is just have a very keen sense of self-awareness. In my, we do a lot of different things for work, and a big part of my workday is writing articles as a freelance
Mhm.
writer. And there's some days where I have to write 3,000 words for a client, and there's other days where I edit or send an email to our email list, and some days I have to do all three. So for me
Yeah.
personally, I'm much more likely to go by the length of time the task takes. So I'll start with an email, which takes me like 15, 20 minutes. Then I'll
Right.
edit, which goes faster. And then, the big task, I'm not going to sit down and write 3,000 words in one swoop. So I'll do some on it before I pick up my kids from school. Then I'll pick it up after, while one of them's in an activity. Then after they go to bed, I'll do another hour and then it'll be done. I guess I could do the easier task at the end, but like I get more energy at night for work. That's just how I am, and everybody's different.
Yeah, and I kind of look at that and I think that makes to me that makes sense because especially for the longer task and breaking it up because your brain
Yeah.
can work on things in the background while you're working on stuff. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? Like you're
Hmm.
if you write an article, you're mentally processing stuff. That's how I work and kind of leaves room for inspiration to come in too. So when we're talking about feeling behind, I want to go back to what you were saying before about like in life I think
Mm.
life has ups and downs. We all know that we've both experienced ups and we're coming out of some downs and I hope we're going back up even
Feels
higher
like
to where
it.
we've ever been. It does feel like it. It's
Yeah.
been a good year for all of that so far. What would you say to somebody who is kind of on that downward trajectory and they're just like they're suffering from comparison syndrome, they're looking at what everyone else has. What would be, because you're so inspirational when you talk about things, so I really could just,
Yeah.
I can just sit here now and now that I've set you up and you can just go.
It's a very nice thing to say, but honestly, the thing that came to mind is actually one of your analogies, which is to step outside of the painting, right, and to take a look in. And what we mean by that is like when you're in the images or in the painting, you're looking all around and you don't feel like you're measuring up. And all of us, we get so impacted by whatever societal messages are coming in, cultural norms from how we grew up. And it can be really hard if you feel like you're not measuring up to that.
Mm.
But if you step outside of the painting and you start to think about it and you really give yourself time to question everything you've been taught, everything that society tells us means that you equal success, and you ask yourself some questions like, well, who the heck made up these rules? And maybe the rules are fake. And maybe people just follow this path because it's just what everyone else has done because no one else has to try something else. And if you do try something else, you're often shunned or people say that's crazy because it's so much safer and easier to go along the prescribed path. So if anyone's like feeling like that on the downward trajectory, pause, take a step back. Why do I feel this way? Who told me that I'm behind? Where am I getting that message from? And kind of going through that list of gratitude of reasons you're okay. And then once you get a little bit like you're feeling better mentally as you're going through it, like, wait a second, I don't have to do any of those things. What do I want? How do I want to live? And now what do I need to do to get there? Then you're living with authenticity. You're living from the inside out. And then that's where true happiness comes.
Wow, you got all of that from my painting analogy. That was impressive. Wow.
Yeah, just take credit for it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think most of the stresses that come from us, we don't question them, right? And so when you're
Yeah.
saying I feel behind, we can look at it and go, oh, you know what? Yeah, like they just got this thing, or this person's going here, this person's doing that. And it's like the second you start comparing yourself to somebody else, you've lost. You've absolutely lost because I can guarantee you one of two things. you're not comparing your whole life to them. You are taking like the sliver of almond on the top of the tart, and that's a terrible analogy. I'm going to do that again.
An almond on a
I don't know.
tart? What are you talking
I
about?
don't know. Okay. So sorry, Steve. We're going to go again. I can
No, you
guarantee
leave
you
that in. You leave the almond at this.
they can't all be gems.
You leave in that terrible analogy.
Okay.
Jeez.
So so my point is, when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, you totally messed me up. Jeez. Um, when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, you're only comparing that thing that you want. You're not comparing the job that they have to go to,
Yeah.
their upbringing, their past, their whole life has led them to that moment that of
Mm.
having that thing you want. And you can have that thing, but to be hard on yourself and go, oh, they got to go here, they got to have that, and I didn't, I'm behind. It's, well, they could be 15 years older than you. They could have had, they could have parents that are well off and they
Yep.
have a trust fund. You just don't know. And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
those things. It's just kind of, you're not acknowledging the full details
Right.
of it.
You don't know how people arrived to where they did. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you a good example of that, and it's something that happened this week. There's these very common things that kind of circle around the internet, like how much money you should have saved and invested at each
Oh,
age
gosh.
in order to retire successfully, right? And so, of course, every time I
Right.
look at those, I'm like, oh, well, I'm definitely not at whatever this person says I should be at this age. And in order to prevent myself from going down the rabbit hole of, well, I would have been there if all these things wouldn't happened, and then I just make myself feel worse, I just like to step outside of the painting and say, these numbers are for people that are going through the very step by step prescribed life, which is great. It's a great way to plan, great way to do. These are for people who plan to work, retire at 65. This is how much money they need in this period of inflation to make sure that they're okay and safe at a certain age. But then I tell myself, like, you don't have to follow this step by step guide. You don't have to have all of these things that they say. You can arrive at, there are other things that you can do. As we like to say, when you're self-employed, your income is limitless. It's sort of like
Yeah.
there is no cap on it, and any number of things could happen. Now, of course, I work towards it. I don't just sit back and say, oh, this step by step is not for me. I
Right.
just sit back and say, well, I know that I would like to invest more. I would know that I would like numbers closer to this or better, but I'm going to have to arrive at it a different way too. But there's no quote unquote like catch up. Like, nobody gets to set the rules of what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Anything can happen at any time, uh, in a good way.
Yeah. So two things again that come to mind when you are looking back and going, well, if this had happened and that had happened, the thing that always comes up is I find that that's such a, because I do it too, and it's like, well, what happens if I had done this or that or whatever, or things hadn't changed? It kind of takes you out of the of where you are, because it's making you feel
Mm-hmm.
bad for where you are, and the whole point of it is of life is to feel good, and the better you feel in the moment, the better things tend to happen to you. The other thing is, and I say this as somebody who has written that article too, I know you have, because you've pretty much written about every financial thing under the sun at this point. Those things are stupid. And that, because, I went to, it's not what they need to talk about is that, and I'm sorry, I'm going to, I just bought a new soapbox I'd like to get up on right now. And what they're talking about, it has nothing to do with how much you have. It has everything to do with how much you spend, your plans for the future in that spending, and how much you
Yeah.
have. So if I'm living
Right.
off $500, living in a cardboard box under a bridge, and the only time I spend money is to go to the laundry to wash my shirt every day because I only have the one shirt, maybe I only need $500 a month to sustain
Mm-hmm.
myself. Terrible imagery. I'm just cranking them out today. Sorry, folks, they won't get any better. And
can,
but if
can
I
confirm. Yes, it's my goal every day to get him to snort laugh. Yes. Success. This is what success feels like.
This is what the good feels like. So,
Yes.
but
So excited.
if I'm so happy for both of us. And so if I am needing to go to, if I need to follow Taylor Swift around the country or the world and see every one of her concerts and stay in hotels
Yeah.
and private flights, well, then I'm going to need a little bit more than the 1.5 million that article says that I need, or the 3
Yeah.
million, or whatever it is right now, because that's a huge difference. And what we have to accept when we read those things is they're really good at provoking you to kind of think about it,
Yeah.
but you need to know your numbers with that stuff. All right, I'm just going to put the
Yeah.
box away and I'll get down now. Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah.
Well, okay, so I want to kind of bring it all back together and I want to leave with some actionable tips. So, this episode is called When You're Feeling Behind. And what we recommend for the day to day feelings of overwhelm is to do a little internal search and find out what method of tackling that to-do list works for you. Again, for some people, it might be starting with the biggest task, long as has other people, like myself, like to start out with the little bite-sized things to get the momentum going. But, just know that you just have to get started, and whatever order you take your tasks, that will help you. And it will take this big feeling of overwhelm and break it down into smaller bite-sized steps. Regarding the feeling of feeling behind in life, I want you to just know that everybody feels that way. Everyone feels like they should be further along. And just to take the time, as we always say, to think about the 5-year version of you, think about what you really, really want, and to do the things in your life that lead you towards that place of authenticity. And remember, the rules are fake. There's no prescribed path. There's no milestones you have to hit by a certain time. You are not behind. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. And you need to live the life that you want to pursue, whatever that looks like for you.
Well said. I'm
Thanks.
doing my best to keep quiet right now. My analogies have been off. I'm snorted.
Really?
We'll go to Glimmers, I think.
Yeah, that seems like a safe bet, but you never know. So go ahead. Let's see. You go. Go ahead.
So, for those of you who are not aware, glimmers are these little things that bring us joy and just light us up inside. And it can be anything from finding a penny to something much much bigger. But every episode, we'd like to share something that lit us up. And I'm gonna go hand it off to Kat because she's laughing at something. So, what you got, Kat?
Um, Man, I just had the best glimmer last week, and as it was happening, I was like, "Oh, this is so going to be my glimmer." So I was traveling last week. I was flying on a plane. First of all, I never can sleep on planes, but this time I did. So now, never say never, folks. So I was so tired, and I curled up in a little ball, and I fell asleep on the plane, joyous. Then I woke up. This is a double glimmer, people. Then I woke up, and the guy next to me said, "I got you cookies. You were sleeping when the snack cart came by, and I put the cookies in your little pocket." And I'm like, "You did? Thank you so much." He was like, "Well, yeah, I know it's like not fun to miss the snack cart, and everyone likes cookies." I'm like, "Everyone does like cookies. Thank you." And I just thought that was so freaking thoughtful.
That is really, really nice. That's a good glimmer. And yeah, those cookies are amazing. And it really does suck when you like doze off for 20 minutes. You
I
wake up and you're like,
know when
oh
you
man,
miss it.
I missed it.
I've,
So
you know, I've
that's
never, so now I'm going to do that for other people because I've never thought about doing that for somebody. And now it was just so nice to wake up and didn't have a
so
cookie.
nice. Yeah, and yeah. Um
How about
my
you?
my glimmer this week is I'm kind of as I grow right now, I'm making new friends and I'm going on a lot of different podcasts and meeting people. But one of my friends who's fairly new, Willie Joe, we've talked about him
Mm-hmm.
before. He was having he got stuck in his head like I do all the time, and he reached out, and I thought that was great.
Mm.
And I was able to help him, and uh, it wasn't anything big. It was just kind of a quick chat, kind of getting things out, because you know how I am. You've worked with me long enough that once I get in my head, my head is the worst place to live. I charge
No.
myself rent there. Again, that's a terrible analogy. That's 3 for 3. Hopefully they're out. But yeah, so what happened though was the glimmer part of that helping him was great. It always feels good to help somebody. But what I told my son this morning was that because he met him on our trip down south, and I said, like, it's not just about you having problems and feeling like you can go talk to someone. It's giving that other person the ability to help you, and that makes them
Yeah.
feel amazing too. So you solve your problem, they feel great for helping. Whether I actually helped or not, sometimes you just have to talk it out loud with another
Yeah.
person. And so that was my glimmer, was just kind of knowing that, yeah, that's
I love that. That's so nice. And it's nice with new friends too, when you feel like you've reached that level of trust where they'll reach out and talk to you when they need something. So I love that.
yeah, because that's what I want. I want friends that I can be vulnerable with. They can be vulnerable with me, and we can actually talk about stuff rather than be superficial, which is not my issue.
Not your jam.
Um, no, I
Yeah.
can't. I can't be superficial. We know that. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, what do I do moving forward from this? First of all, find the way that works best for you, and be willing to try new things. Try doing the smallest thing first. Get started. Eat that frog. Whatever makes sense to you, give it a try. And whenever you are looking at your life and going, "Oh, I'm so far behind everyone else," know that you're not. Know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and think about all the things you've overcome already, because that's a big deal. And just keep walking your path. And like Kat said, the rules are fake, so make your own up.
I love it.
Hey, thanks for listening. Remember, it doesn't matter where you come from, it only matters where you're going.
As always, we're rooting for you.
To stay up to date on the podcast, hit subscribe wherever you listen and follow us on social media at 5-Year You. This podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inspire you on a personal journey towards your best self. We are in no position to give advice and are hot messes on the best of our days. Clearly, we're in no position to offer health or medical advice, or really any life advice, but we want to entertain you. Just a reminder, this is not a replacement for proper medical care or therapy. If you are struggling, please seek help from a qualified health professional.